Roughly 2 years ago, I made this video. I just started my YouTube channel, and in this video, I'm talking about No Man's Sky on the Xbox Series. I also stated very clearly in this video that this game supports HDR on the Xbox Series and most likely on the PlayStation 5 as well. But don't ask me how did I came to the impression actually back then that this game really supports HDR, because nowadays I know there is no such thing as a HDR supported games. All what games are supporting is the HDR system level calibration on the console or the PC. So again, I don't know what I actually said back then, but it was most likely wrong. But nowadays, with all my gained wisdom, and it's actually not much, but nowadays I can clearly state and say that this game right now does not support the HDR system level calibration on the Xbox, PlayStation 5 and PC. But before we start talking about No Man's Sky on the consoles and PC, do me a big favor, like, share and subscribe. And by the way, go back and watch my first video about this game. The link is in the description. It is just hilarious and a little bit of embarrassing. But anyway, do me a favor, watch it and put in the comment section what you think about the video from back then and the video today. Anyway, let's start with No Man's Sky on the consoles. In this case, the Xbox Series X, but I'm very sure the same counts for the PlayStation 5 version. So I tested the game with in terms of HDR maximum peak brightness with different settings on the HDR system level calibration, because as you can see here, we have no setting at all in terms of HDR in the game. And usually where we have no settings at all in the game in terms of HDR, that means in some games, not in all games, that we have HDR system level calibration support. But again, not in all games, because Dead Space, the remake, there is no setting at all in terms of HDR, but there's also no HDR system level calibration support. The same, it looks like, counts here for No Man's Sky, because we have literally no settings at all. And I tested different values actually, or settings from the HDR system level calibration support, but the outcome in the game after my testing is always the same. The maximum setting in the HDR system level calibration on the Xbox is 10,000 nits, and I have done this. I restarted the game and my readings are around 800 nits, the maximum reading. Then I recalibrated the HDR system level calibration on the Xbox to 300, which is the absolute minimum level, but the maximum peak brightness readings in the game are exactly the same as before. So that means there is no HDR system level calibration support on the Xbox Series X, and I'm very sure the same counts for the PlayStation 5. But let me make one thing very clear. Right now, I'm not quite sure if this is a bug due to the latest update patch, because what the developer actually mentioned in the patch notes is they reworked or they worked on HDR for this patch as well. So maybe something went wrong. I'm not quite sure about this. Or this game, No Man's Sky, never ever supported HDR system level calibration support in the first place. But if this is the case, then we would probably see, or most likely see, some settings in terms of HDR peak brightness, as you can see here on the PC version, because we can actually change between 1000 nits, 600, 400, and of course we can turn it off. But just because we have settings now in the PC version, that doesn't mean they're working as they should be. Because here we have the next weird thing. When I'm setting the HDR settings in the game to 1000, then I would expect a maximum peak brightness of around 1000 nits on my LG G2. And of course, I tested the HDR Windows 11 calibration app, the HDR calibration app as well. But it really doesn't matter if I set this to the maximum value or the minimum value, the maximum peak brightness in the game is always the same. But here's the weird thing. With the internal setting in the game set to 1000, the maximum reading in the game in terms of peak brightness was around 800 nits. So don't get me wrong, this is not a bad value for the LG CX or even the G2, but of course I was expecting a little bit more. The weird part starts now. When you now decrease this value to 600, you suddenly gain a little bit more peak brightness. Maybe around 50, 80, 100 nits, but you get more instead of less. And the whole thing gets even weirder when we're now changing the setting to 400, because now suddenly we have a maximum peak brightness of around 2000 nits on the very same object. This doesn't make sense at all, because I was just thinking in the very beginning, oh, maybe the setting is just reversed or whatever. So 400 is actually 1000, but if this would be the case, why I'm having 2000 nits instead of 1000 nits? It just doesn't make sense. What is my conclusion now for HDR or for the HDR settings on the console and PC? So on the console, there's nothing what you can do, or you can't change anything apart from changing to dynamic tone mapping on, dynamic tone mapping off, or HDRG if you have a capable TV. In this case, No Man's Sky, I would recommend to use actually HDRG, because I personally found dynamic tone mapping on way too bright in this game. Dynamic tone mapping off, as always, not a good idea for a game which has a maximum peak brightness of around 800 candela, because it will fit most of the TVs just perfectly. On the PC, on the other hand, I would recommend actually to use the option 600 instead of 1000, and maybe give it a try with 400, because it can make HDR actually better than on the console, because it will pop a little bit more. The same recommendation as on the console in terms of HDRG. I do like HDRG on the PC version with setting 400, and I know you will have a little bit of clipping, but HDR just pops a little bit more with setting 400, which is maximum peak brightness of around 2000, and then in combination with HDRG. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and do me the favor, watch my old video, because it is just hilarious and very embarrassing actually, but it really shows how much I evolved, is this the right word? How much I actually got better over the time. It's really crazy, especially when we're talking about video and sound quality. This is now different. It's like day and night. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for watching me. Again, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.